when you're writing programming, so what unfolds in the spreadsheet or on your paper, or however you're doing this, is great. But then we need to make sure that the intent of the program matches what actually happens when we execute the workout up on the floor. All right, guys, welcome back to Jerk Vlog Talk. Jason Fernandez here with Cassidy Belinsky. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, I want to talk about the process for programming. I'll give you guys a little insight into how we do our programming, and this is only one way to do programming. This is not necessarily like how you should do programming. The whole takeaway of this video is essentially that it should be an intentional process. You shouldn't be kind of doing things randomly, and there's some ways to kind of sprinkle different aspects of your programming in and piece them together and do all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, when you're programming, the metric that we should be going off of is everybody getting fitter. Are they getting stronger? Are the times getting faster? Outside of that, quite frankly, there's a very large argument that it doesn't really matter like how you put your stuff in there and what strength days and what metcons you do, but we should be applying variance. So every month, so Cassidy's in here with me, every month it is the middle of the month of September, so we are reviewing October's programming right now. So I used to write it and we outsourced it. You can take a look at a different video talking about that. So Cassidy now writes it, and then he and I sit down and we review it, and we go through a couple different things on like what we're trying to achieve that month, and look at it for any sort of unintentional biases we might have, anything like that. But I'm going to let him talk a little bit about, because I did not do it kind of with this kind of color code here, but you can talk a little bit about what you do there and why there, Cassidy.
So what we're doing with these is all the different colors are really for time domains. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom on that one, Jason, if it's blue, it means that it's a long workout, 18 minutes or longer. The kind of tan color is for our heavy days. The yellow is for faster workouts, something that would be eight minutes or less, more of the sprint style. And then the orange would be the middle frame, somewhere between like 10 to 15, 10 to 18, just those gaps. And kind of what we're doing on it is we try and make sure they're not back-to-back heavy days or back-to-back sprints, and it's a good split across the entire week. A majority of our stuff is usually that 10 to 15 range, whether it's 3 rounds, 4-time, AMRAPs, what have you. But this is kind of just the initial rough draft of what we put together, and this is where Jason and I go back in and we pick and plug in it, and I try not to shy away from anything in here. Like on the first Saturday, the first blue day, it's a 60-minute AMRAP with a heavy deadlift, box jumps, and double unders. So it's a long workout with a heavy weight in it. A couple days later, we're going into the quarter marathon row. And what's kind of funny about the days that most people complain about, like these long ones, not many people are a fan of long rows or long runs or you name it, but those usually are the days where most people show up, oddly enough. And as we're just going through this, we'll kind of look at it and see, do we have 3 straight days of pressing in it? Is it 5 straight days of squatting? Is there too much pulling from the floor? Is it what's actually getting hit, so we have a good mix on it? Making sure we hit everything from just the air squat all the way up to ring muscle ups and strict handstand push-ups and deficit this and single arm that, just to make sure we're hitting all the wickets across the board and making sure we're not doing 7 days of push presses in the month and maybe there's only 2 days, but we're doing 2 days of rope climb. So we're hitting every little thing we can try and hit throughout it.
For those of you that kind of took the level 2 course, this is like a color-coded, watered-down visual representation of that tally sheet that we would do, right? And this is not necessarily how we program, but when we color code this, it really does help us get like a real good visual snapshot of do we have a good balance of time domains in there. So just by looking at that, and we know that tan means like we're going to get that single heavy day. So right out the bat, I can just scan through this and make sure we're getting that heavy day. So I've got 1, 2, and then I've got 3, and then 4. So once he's written that, then we'll kind of go back and forth, and now we'll start digging in on the different movements and modalities to see if we have a good balance there. And we'll go through this day by day, and we'll change some of it. And then probably once a month, you'll change something on the fly, which I used to do regularly as well. But talk a little bit about that, dude, because I think that's important too.
There's some of these where, let's say on a Wednesday, it's like the heavy bench, and then, or like the row, maybe smoke the forearms more than intended, or the legs, what have you. And then the next day might be another pull or another squat, and finish Tuesday up that night, kind of realize, hey, I'm going to be a lot more sore than I initially intended. So then the next day we might switch it, or we might change movements, or we might switch 2 days around, or we might switch days across the week, just so we can hit the right stimulus going into the next day. Because if the next day is supposed to be like a heavy deadlift, and the day before the legs are too shot from running or rowing or what have you, we're not hitting how we should be hitting. So we might swap some things around just on the fly.
And the point of that is that when you're writing programming, so what unfolds in the spreadsheet or on your paper, or however you're doing this, is great. But then we need to make sure that the intent of the program matches what actually happens when we execute the workout up on the floor, because if it doesn't, then it's not effective. So sometimes we will misgauge time domains or rep schemes or something like that. And the longer you do this, like, you'll get better at getting a pretty good idea of like what that should look like. But you should be testing them prior to, because it will happen on a fairly frequent basis where you misjudged it, and then I need to adjust the rep schemes or whatever to make sure it comes back into the intent, so that you get it correctly. And then once we've kind of ironed this out, then Cassidy will go in and he will write the accessory programming to match the workouts for that week or for that month, and we'll go through that together. But this is kind of the process that we do, so it kind of gets 2 or 3 looks before we go live with it, and then even with those 2 or 3 looks, we will still make adjustments in a route. But again, the overarching kind of guiding light that we're going off of is, are people getting stronger? Are the times getting faster? Are they getting more rounds in their metcons, etc.? So just a little insight into programming. Again, it's not necessarily like this is the way to do it or this is how you should do it. This is more targeted towards, it should just be a very intentional process as you go about this, in order to start getting better at it and evaluate it over time. So if you guys have any other questions about programming, about like how we do it, about things that we find effective or ineffective, go ahead and drop those in the comments. And if you like this stuff, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, thanks guys, see ya.